"I want to take these 2 women to get medical help," the soldier next to Jakob said. "You too. We've got trucks coming for the others. They'll be here in a few minutes. Our medics will take care of them. Will you tell them that? The Nazis are gone. No one is going to hurt them now." Jakob translated what he'd said in French to Emmanuel, then German and Russian, which he appeared to speak fluently as well. The women nodded, and the jeep took off toward the main part of the complex with Jakob, Emmanuel, and the other woman, who had slipped into unconsciousness by then. Jakob was holding Emmanuel's hand, and the soldiers noticed that they all had a dead look in their eyes. They had been through an unspeakable hell for as long as they'd been there. None of the Americans could fully understand what they were seeing, and the residents of the camp didn't have the strength to explain, but they were walking proof of what the Nazis had done to them. A medical tent had already been set up by then, and a soldier escorted Jakob and Emmanuel inside. Another soldier carried the unconscious woman. As soon as Emmanuel was being tended to by an army medic, Jakob hobbled back outside to help the soldiers with explanations about the locations of the camp offices and other barracks. There was a mountain of naked corpses the Nazis had wanted to have buried before they left, but hadn't had time to see to it. The soldiers were devastated as they entered the dormitories, and medics followed them, carrying litters to bring out the sick and the dead. Jakob stayed with them for a long time to be as helpful as he could, translating for them. And after that, he went back to the tent to find Emmanuel. She was his friend, and the food she had stolen for him had sustained him. More than that was unthinkable here. Having a friend was rare enough, particularly a woman. She had been very brave to give him what she did. She had almost been caught once, when a guard suspected her of putting a potato in her pocket, but she had let it drop to the ground, and it was so small and rotten the guard hadn't bothered with it. He had hit her with a whip on the back of the neck and moved on. She had picked it up again before she left, when she had finished work. The medic tending to her asked her name, and Jakob supplied it. "Emmanuelle Berger. She's 23 years old, from Paris. She's been here for almost 2 years." "Is she your sister?" "No, I'm Austrian. We're friends." The young soldier nodded and made note. Eventually, they would have more than 21,000 histories to take, but the Red Cross would help them do that. Families and survivors would have to be reunited. This was only the beginning, and just in the short time they'd been there, prisoners had continued to die. For some, the Americans had come too late. For others, like Emmanuelle, just in time. The other woman from her barracks had died while they were examining her. The following day, April 12th, the 80th Infantry Division came to take control of the camp. Medical units had been arriving since the day before, responding to emergency calls from the 83rd Infantry. They'd never seen anything like it. It was a camp filled with living corpses who were barely clinging to life. How they had survived was beyond imagining. They were using all their translators to communicate with the freed prisoners, who spoke many languages, and after a cursory examination by the medics, Jakob had continued to help them where he could, since he spoke English, German, Russian, and French. The next day, the press corps arrived and were photographing everything. One team was making newsreels of the freed prisoners. This was hard evidence of just how inhuman the Nazis were. They weren't prisoners of war, although it would have been inexcusable treatment of them too. These were civilians who had been brought from all over Europe and incarcerated in the camp. The army already knew there were other camps like it, but Buchenwald was the first they'd seen. The mayor of Langenstein had done as he'd been ordered to do, and food and water were brought to the camp to feed the survivors. Both were dispensed with meticulous caution by the Red Cross and medical personnel, as too much of either could kill the starving prisoners if taken too quickly. The army had buried the corpses. There was no way to identify them other than by their numbers, although books had been found in the camp office, with careful records the Nazis hadn't had time to destroy before they left. And there were extensive records of experiments in the medical facility, too. But all of that would be gone through later. In the early days, they were treating the survivors medically and trying to save everyone they could.